like whack-a-mole and this sort of frustrating experience. I think there is, at least from my perspective, reason to be optimistic that we can move it and accelerate it further. And I think with that, the clock is out.
We're done. Keep kicking us, Scott.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Scott, Bob, Marla, and George. We look forward to collaborating and setting priorities with all of you for the coming year. So now we're going to welcome to the stage Kate Serkin and all of her panelists who represent the end users of media measurement. These are the people with the real experiences here. So they're going to talk about some of the different options that they're testing out as they help to push forward viable new solutions. So come on up.
Let's go.
Hey, then. Hey. Thank you, everybody. We were unfortunately all sitting at the back, so it took us a couple of minutes to get here. So this is going to be an interesting panel. What we're going to focus on after we've heard lots of people talk about what their wish lists are is what are some of the successes that we've seen. You know, SIM has been going for 7 years. This is the 7th summit that they've had. We've talked a lot about innovation, and we've spent time in those summits doing some bashing of some companies, and we're not going to focus on that now. We're going to talk about what are the innovations, who's doing it right, what are the things that these companies have done over the last couple of years that really are helping them against their business goals. We've got 2 people from those walled gardens that everybody keeps talking about. So we're going to give them the chance to speak. Yay.
I was going to say, how did we end up?
Yeah, why?
Sitting together.
We should have spread out.
We should. Well, they're going to speak about some of the things that they're doing with the industry and maybe some of the things that they're doing on their own to help make progress for the environment that we're in. And then we've got, I did a count. We've probably got 50% of the ad revenue of this country on this platform now. People responsible for the measurement on the buy side and the sell side. So I think that's a really, a good way to think about, the influence of what people have done in the past and their thoughts and views about what should be done in the future. And the companies that they're working with today to try and drive that innovation. So I have a few questions here, and we're going to get to those. So, if we think about, the difference between, a traditional, purity of measurement, we think about panels and, maybe survey-based research and the evolutions there. And then we think from the other side about big data and all of the innovations and opportunities there. I'd love to hear people's views on which of those is driving more impact for your business today, and how do you think that's going to change in the future? Why don't we start with you?
I don't know that I could point to one or the other. I think it's kind of finding the right combination of everything is what, is the goal, and what, we try to do with, our in-house sort of analytics and data stack is try and find the right combination of those things that we're going to be able to give us the right signals and enable us to act accordingly.
Okay, so not one specific on either side right now?
I think, yeah.
Seeing they're both about equal value?
Yeah, the title of the panel is who's getting it right, and I think the good news, I think, is that a lot of companies are getting some things right. Nobody's getting it all right, but, maybe we don't necessarily want that at the end of the day. But, we want to be able to pick and choose the components that are gonna drive our clients' business.
Right. I think Rashad mentioned that at the beginning. Competition is always still important. Yeah. Competition is what drives innovation, from my perspective. And when people have got the opportunity to come in and sell something unique to meet your unique needs, that's when innovation really happens. Howard, what about from your side?
I agree with Brian. I think it's both. Look, we're at a stage in our businesses where I think we got to keep driving value with things like traditional linear TV. And you heard Joe earlier talk about an initiative like OpenAP, which we think does that in a really, really big way. But then the other side of it is that if we're ever going to get really good at selling cross-platform, where you have linear TV combined with digital, we have to take advantage of what digital does, which is addressable. And we need to find a way of using big data to actually merge the two, so that when we are targeting digitally, we're taking into account the audience and the right level of exposure relative to what we think TV is going to do. So I think it's a combination of both.
And which companies have you been working with that have helped you there? Is there anybody that you can talk about specific examples?
I think it's a combination of using Nielsen correctly, using ComScore correctly, using companies like Epsilon, who's doing a lot to help us with our own data
Matching,
stack.
please. Okay. Then Alyssa?
Not to just be repetitive, but I
Lisa?
do think it is the combination, but I think it's how it's combined that's really important, and particularly depending on the question. So I'm sort of representing the program research side on the panel. So as we're trying to really understand how our viewers are sort of moving around, we need to make sure that that data is matched correctly. But the panel isn't going to allow us to go deeper given the fragmentation of viewing. So it's really making sure that it's combined in a way that will actually give us confidence in those insights.
Right, so the size of the audience where you can add up the totality, but then when you can dedupe it against some of those big panels to do that one then. And Danielle?
So I've become a pragmatist in my old age. I started, at a company where we were very focused on pure probability sampling, and I agree these problems are really bigger than what we can solve with those. And so the companies that I see really helping are the ones that are taking combined approaches. Certainly, kind of the Nielsen solution for Reach is a good example. Same with ComScore and others. I think that is really needed. I was happy to hear George say that it's not enough, especially on the Lyft side, to just have these data sets coming together. We actually do need to understand the quality of the methodology and the quality of the matching. Those are super important and something we spend a lot of time on.
And who helps you find the answers to those? George talked a lot about setting standards and auditing from the MRC's perspective. How do you know when you've got those matches right and the quality of those matches? We all have multiple identities, don't we? So how does somebody know who I am, what my household is, with the 4 email addresses that I've got today, the 3 different phone numbers I've got, the digital devices that I've got?
Kate, please stand up. I think great answers. I don't think the industry has the solutions yet, to be honest. I think in a lot of cases you don't need to do exactly what you were just saying. We have the benefit of running really well-controlled experiments, which we can then use to validate some of these things. I think that's part of this hybrid approach that we have to really think about a lot more. For instance, for multi-touch attribution, using experiments to test assumptions and to see if the results are matching, and then going off to use a model under certain circumstances that have been tested and proven is kind of the way that we need to operate.
So less about the purity and more about aggregating kind of the right thing to do, and what's the learning you can get from that?
Yeah, to the extent we can be pure, we should.
Yeah.
The goal is to figure out if we're measuring something real and capturing value, and
Right.
if we can validate that without necessarily doing it perfectly, yes, I think that's better than not.
Progress, not perfection, always. Then Alyssa, what about the work that you're doing at Google?
Yeah, and I think it's similar. I think panels are super critical for representation, but they're increasingly hard to build for representation. So, and I'm not just talking about younger and multicultural audiences. When you think about what it takes to get cooperation these days, it's just incredibly difficult. But you need the panel to calibrate, right? But you need larger census data and logs data to cover the fragmentation. But to your question about I have 3 email addresses, I've got 4 accounts, you also need panels as a source of ground truth, right? So that you start netting out who is, these 4 accounts are Kate, or how do I understand all these different accounts, and how do I get to a more complete kind of single audience view?
Right. I wish the one person that we had on this platform is somebody from Netflix, because they know exactly who I am in my 5 accounts. And so I think that's probably one for next year, Jane. They wouldn't come.
Shocker.
We got to figure out a way to get them to come, because I don't think we had Facebook and Google so much last year. So I think we're definitely making progress.
I was here. I was over there.
You're like, we just weren't invited on stage.
There we go. Okay.
It just took us a while to crack in. We're getting there.
We'll get Netflix in the audience, and then we'll try and get them on the stage. Because I mean, my sense is within the industry, we've got all of the information. It's just not in the right place right now. It's not connected and it's not together. So I'd love for us to keep driving down that path.
I kind of liked Suzanne's Scotch tape analogy from this morning, except I'm going to say duct tape because we all know that fixes everything.
But think about it, Netflix has great line of sight to the time you spend on Netflix.
Yep.
And they know maybe who you are by doing some of the same data pens we all do, but in terms of media consumption outside of that, they're blind too. So even though we always look at them as sort of the ideal, they have a bunch of blind spots too.
Right, but they can buy a lot of that data from the marketplace. So, I think, they would hope to get that. If we've got companies in the audience today thinking about coming to sell to you guys to try and offer some solutions, what would be your advice about some of the gaps that you've got today and things that you need them to help you fill in?
I mean, not to beat a dead horse, but the complete cross-platform thing is still quite elusive, and something that we're working on multiple fronts to try and solve. So, I mean, anything that helps us get there, I think I would definitely listen.
So the bits to stick with the Scotch tape.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, what do we have to the pipes that we have to stop.
So you're interested in pipes and data. 'Cause
Sure.
I think that's important for us all. We're in a world today where we can't just stick it all in an Excel sheet and hope to get answers with that. Technology is much more sophisticated and data's more sophisticated.
Yeah, we need plumbers.
Plumbers.
Yeah.
I would go a different direction with that,
Okay.
and just to say, and this advice to new measurement vendors as well as existing ones, really just take the time to understand our business and understand what our business questions are, so that when you come to us, it's not just what are the capabilities that you can offer us, but how can you offer us solutions to our business questions? Because otherwise we never move from interesting to ROI, which means we can't invest with you.
Right. I think the attribution paper has been really helpful to start the industry thinking about very specific questions that those companies can provide and give you a way to think across them, so you don't need to meet with all 26 of them. I have no desire to meet with all 26 of those companies. We just don't have time. But we can look through that now and say, which of you can solve some of the answers to my questions there?
Yeah, I think one of the things I would say is, so first of all, plumbing is right. The whole idea of OpenAP was fix the plumbing and see if that will help the industry do more in terms of audience. But the other one, and you've heard it a couple of times today, is something around measuring attention or engagement. There's no lack of exposures that are available for an advertiser or an agency to buy and for us to craft and create, and they're not all created equally. And I think, the maggot stuff is great. We love it, but I don't know that scales to the businesses we run of, thousands of campaigns. So if someone's out there in the audience and they think they have a scalable, repeatable, predictable measure of engagement,
Cost-effective.
Cost-effective, please come see us.
Right.
I think that's important, the repeatable piece. So from our perspective, be prepared to validate the methodology, repeatability, transparency on what data is in there and how things are calculated is critical. We will ask those questions.
Yeah, I think what I've been impressed with in the industry is, with the launch of all of this big data, is the technical expertise within some of the companies and their ability to be able to make sense of the data, insist on high quality. But high quality has changed from what it used to be, which is just representativeness and sample size, to really validating the work that people do. So I think that's powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're focused on plumbing and bringing all these things together, the transparency as well as validating kind of what you're bringing together, as well as you've actually put it together. You've applied the Scotch tape in the appropriate fashion, and becomes super critical. So I do think kind of being very upfront about what you're offering, what are the downsides, what are the benefits, just so that it can kind of be balanced out. And I think the other piece of the plumbing and the Scotch tape also is a bit of like, measurement's now a team sport, right? It's very hard to get it from one player nowadays. So in some respects, a lot of this is also just cooperation is just much more needed.
Right. I'd love you each to give one example of something really tangible that you've done in the last year that has increased your ability to understand what's happening on your platform and provide value to either content providers or in terms of content measurement or ad measurement, or either for planning or for some kind of attribution at the back end. I would like people to go away with progress that we've made in this space, even though it's not holistic measurement of everything. But just to give one example of where, the vendor that you've used, or whether you've used your internal pipes and plumbing and data sets that you've stitched together, or something that you worked with maybe somebody in the audience or some company that's not here today. Do you want to start, Brian?
Sure. And we did a study with Moat, actually, and we had done previously viewability study with Integral Ad Science, and it was really just sort of trying to correlate viewability and time in view to ad recall and stuff like that. And then we took it a step further by doing it with DR advertising and actually being able to tie it to results. And one of the important findings I think we did come up with is that in terms of the MRC standard versus some of the other standards that are out there, they all work pretty much equally as well. And so what the takeaway for me was, if we can all kind of agree to stick to the same standard, and I don't just mean about viewability but other things as well, that I think it solves a lot of the maybe initial problems we have in the industry, and I think greases the skids and helps us all work better together. So I'm a big fan of sort of common standards and sort of common playbooks that help us all do business better.
Do you think that the standards need to, the work that perhaps the companies that are on the stage here do to make sure that they understand how consumer behavior is changing across devices, need to keep pace with the standards? Because as George said, it's taken 9 or 10 years to get the 3MS work to the place it is, and it's in a great place now, but consumer behavior changes all the time. So I think work that we and anybody in the room can do to continue to make sure that those standards are being created against relevant behavior today is important. So love your thoughts on that.
Well, look, I think one of the things we got to do, and I think you heard the previous panel talk about this a little bit, is we need to get better about thinking about measurement and how it correlates to outcomes. I mean, if you think about all the great work that was done around viewability, I don't think we ever did research that said, and it's sort of what you guys did, what level of viewability drives what outcome depending upon advertiser category platform, and you build back to measurement standards from there.
And how does that spread? Is that a tight correlation, or is it a widespread?
And I just think we have to get better as an industry. And I think sometimes it scares me, because I think we have these blinders on that we're measuring exposure, and that at the end of the day, counting GRPs and reach and frequency is what we're here for. We're not. We're here to take measurement so you guys drive better outcomes, so we're able to drive better yield from our inventory, and that all has to be based on knowing what you could do to drive better outcomes.
Right, and Lisa, your outcome is GRPs. Actually, it is audience.
It is,
making
but
sure you
I was actually going to come at it a different way, which is that we in this room, and particularly the people in this room, we talk a lot about ad currency, but increasingly there's program currency, right? So it's not just the value of something in 3 days or 7 days or a quarter. We have programming that's available for a year or in decades, right? And so I think we've done, to go back to your initial question, as a two-part answer, every once in a while the media companies will stand up here and we'll show you some pretty stacked bar charts, right, of how we add up all of our viewing. They're usually really pretty. But actually we've done a lot of work kind of behind the curtain and getting better at building tools to really allow us to slice and dice that in real time and to be able to optimize that. But I would just also call out, somewhere in here is Brian Fuhrer, but I think Nielsen's work that they did with the SVOD service this year was actually a good example of working with clients on some customized solutions first, really understanding what our business needs were. So with that tool now, it's missing PC and mobile and some of the other SVOD providers we have to get there, but we can actually see when people watch in the first season of a show. We see some of the people that are watching traditional means, we see some that are watching in digital, and those are different audiences. But now what we can do is we can sort of connect the bigger picture. We can see, when that first season gets posted in an SVOD offering, We can see the viewership that's happening there, and we can then actually see in season 2 where they're going. And depending on which SVOD providers and which different audiences, now we have a better idea of how to optimize. And it isn't just about optimizing volumetrics, it's also about the monetization piece. So to me, that was a good step forward.
And is most of that being done inside your own tools with data that's been supplied to you by Nielsen, or is it in tools that other companies have built for you?
We're taking data from Nielsen and Comscore and internal metrics, and then we're using tools and data science to really get more out of that data and to sort of twist it to be more predictive for us.
Right. Okay. Daniel, what about
Yeah,
work that you've done?
I'll build a little bit on what Howard was saying. For us, it is super important to start to understand how value is actually created. So just beyond effectiveness, how, and we use this internally, and my team works on this a lot. We need to understand how the different pieces of our platform, Instagram, Facebook, Messenger, are actually contributing value to a campaign. And so we've spent a lot of time this year, and we've talked about quite a bit of this, with new techniques that help us understand that. So eye tracking, we're exploring biometrics. We have a partnership with Media Science here where we're looking at kind of using those types of techniques to take the next step there, and that's super helpful for us. Again, yes, we want to be able to help marketers understand this and measure it, but for our own purposes, for building these new experiences, we really feel we need to understand it. So in that sense, we are in the same position as any marketer, needing to understand channel allocation and when to send demand one place or another, and whether or not we're doing that properly and what we can do to improve it.
Right, and so you're not just using data that you've got internally, you're going outside to the marketplace to buy different services.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes.
And will you share that learning and insight in as much as it can help advertisers to optimize the platform use that they have?
We are and will, and so again, to the extent that we certainly learn about methodologies and techniques which are useful for this, we intend to talk about that, share that information. This is not something, again, like we think that's going to help the industry, and ultimately not something that we need to be the ones providing. We want this to exist so that we can solve these questions, but we know that everybody needs to have access.
Learn together. And what about work that Google's been doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think given the fragmentation that we've been talking about and how complex the customer journey has gotten, it's very much a combination of like first-party measurement, enabling third parties, making data available. And so all of those are important. And I think on the first-party side, we've done things where we feel there are gaps, right? So one example is with agencies and large brand clients, they've come to us and said, how do I understand my reach across TV and YouTube? So we've made reach curves available to agencies. We've worked with clients as well so that they understand like what's the optimal mix across the two channels. What if I move things around? What does that do? How do I balance frequency across demos? I think as far as third parties as well, we've worked to also make sure that we're enabling third parties as well as making data available. So both with agencies, whether it's through Ads Data Hub or just making data available for media mix models, like all of those are important. And I think because of how consumers are switching screens all the time, like 80% of millennials start shopping on one screen and finish on another, right? So when you're dealing with that reality, given the state of measurement today, it is very much making all of those available, as well as really trying to cooperate with as many folks as possible.
Right, as the industry continues to build planning tools, I know we have our TARDIS planning tool, and we take respondent level data from Nielsen and Comscore, and then we try and feed both Facebook and Google's reach curves into it. And we do, and it's a pain, and we have to do some random duplication stuff, and that's not great. Would it be possible for both Facebook and Google to work more closely with the Comscores and Nielsen so that their syndicated measurement products has the right data in it across, obviously mobile and PC and the devices that you have, and the kind of taxonomies in those data sets match at that level? I think that would provide the planning systems that would be more helpful, certainly from the agency and the advertiser side.
I think we're pretty close to that with total audience ratings and digital ad ratings and total content ratings, in which we are already participating and providing secondary accreditation for content. So that's absolutely kind of our intention, and those things can be built, I think, into robust planning tools. So I think we're actually almost there,
Almost there.
in those terms.
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly working with them. I think part of it is also just having the cross-media standards to also apply, right? So that everyone is kind of speaking the same language and applying the same definitions and metrics as well.
Right. I think that's it. It's important. That would help and alleviate this idea of the walled gardens and the transparency side of it, and make it definitely easier for all of us to plan. I'll start with you again, Brian. Do you ever see a world in which one media measurement company will dominate? And that doesn't need to be a Nielsen or a Comscore. It could be a Google or a Facebook, or it could be Amazon. It could be anybody. Do you ever see that world coming back again, where our lives were easy?
No. I'm sad to say no. I mean,
Me too.
no. I think we're past that. Honestly, I think it's that ship has sailed. So the good news is it kind of fosters competition, and it helps. I think it make a lot more better thinking in the industry about how we solve these problems. A lot more people thinking about it, and a lot more possibilities. So, not necessarily a bad thing, but definitely our lives don't get any easier.
Okay. Do you think we'll go from 26 attribution companies down to a more manageable number?
I think that's up to us. Yeah.
Howard, what do you think?
Yeah, no, and I think one of the reasons for that is, and I think I said this a second ago, we have to change. We have to broaden the aperture on our view, where it's not just measurement. It's planning, optimization, stewardship, optimization, measurement. And the thought that there's going to be any one company who's going to be able to sort of guide a campaign along with all of the connects to first-party data, third-party data, it's impossible. And we do need to build a better, I think, coalition of the willing to figure out how to put that all together.
Yeah. And from a programming perspective, do you think it could?
So I don't think we're ever going to have just one. I think that we do still have to have a need for syndicated measurement, right? We need to understand what the marketplace looks like. We need to understand how we fit in the marketplace and how that's changing. But quite honestly, the world is just too complex. We need to go to other data sources to be able to go deeper in some areas. I think sometimes that's trying to figure out how to connect them. And then other times I think the expression I use is you need to figure out how to triangulate the truth. You're going to have multiple different sources. You may not be able to connect them all. But you need to be able to take a step back and look at all of those and sort of understand what you think the bigger trend is. And to some of what's been talked about today too, I think those are skill sets we have to build up on our teams, because it's not just inherently pulling a report, looking at a number. You're sometimes looking at a lot of different things, and there's an art to it, not just the science piece.
I'll flip the question a little bit for the two at the end, just because.
I had nothing to add to that.
I would say, what would be the two most important areas that you're missing, even with your vast amount of data and insight about people and the identity of those people and the behaviors of those people today?
I don't think our challenges are that different, right? I mean, when you think about the data we have, it's our first-party data, right? We're missing still a number of pieces, right? And I agree with Howard. The cooperation is super necessary, right? If you're going to get a complete view of the consumer, but doing that in a privacy-safe way is super difficult. So we do need the coalition of the willing to come together and sort through how do we do that, both from like a technology perspective as well as a policy perspective. We have to work out all of those questions so that we can have a single view.
For us, when it comes to measurement, we're missing almost everything about offline purchasing, for instance. So knowing that outcome data to do proper measurement, critical. I'd say also just on the issue of kind of attention and cross-publisher, cross-channel comparison, we know very little, which is why we definitely need to partner with third parties to understand those experiences.
Okay, so we've got 8 seconds left. So I think with the, the oncoming challenges of GDPR, which I'm certainly spending a lot of my time thinking about that now and how we think about measurement from that perspective, and all the challenges that these guys have faced today and have in the future. I think we're safe to say as an industry, we're going to have jobs for the next few years, and the machines are not going to take over us. So I think that's good. So thank you, everybody, for your perspectives and discussion.